Hello and welcome to IP Study video lectures. Today we are going to discuss chapter number 4 of grade 8 social science. The chapter name is British Rule and Tribal Communities. So, what is a tribe? A tribe is a group of people identified by a common name, language, belief system, customs and traditions. And they take a lot of pride in these customs and traditions because these are unique to them. So every tribe, if we see across the world and across India, they have something that makes them unique from the mainstream society. If you look at the mainstream society, then there is a caste system, there are social hierarchies which are more or less similar in different mainstream societies. But when we talk about uniqueness, when we talk about cultural heritage, then we often talk about these tribal groups. In India, these tribal groups are known as Adivasis. If we look at the literal meaning of the word Adivasi, it means original inhabitants. So the people who were originally living in a particular area as tribes, they are known as Adivasis. Adivasis have traditionally lived in forest or hilly regions. In the modern times, we see that many Adivasi groups have migrated to other areas for work opportunities, education and other reasons. But in the modern history, we see that these Adivasis mostly lived in these regions. These were often very remote areas and away from the mainstream society. And this is why we see that they did not follow any social rules or rituals. So they were not part of the caste-based society and they engaged in different activities which were related to nature. But yes, as tribal societies grew, they had their own social dynamics, their own social divisions which dictated their lives, right? So because they were not part of the mainstream society, it meant that it did not follow the norms of the mainstream society, but they had their own norms, their own rules on how to live a life. Now, when we want to study about the tribal people during the modern period, then we have a lot of sources and some of these sources are also in the written form. So there are ballads and folklores which are passed from one generation to another. Now, what are ballads? Ballads are stories written about the warriors and these are generally in poetic form or a song, right? So these are written about the brave people who belong to that tribe. Now there are also many official documents. There are gadgets. Gadgets are issued by the government of that time. Then there are newspapers and also biographies. Biographies are the books which are written about other people. So in recent years, if we see, a lot of stuff has been documented about the tribal societies in India. Now let's discuss about the economic activities of people living in the of the tribal people living in the modern period. Now, many of these activities, as you can see, are engaged with nature, hunting, gathering, herding and rearing, and shifting cultivation. Now let's discuss some of these activities. First, we have hunting, gathering. Now hunting, gathering has traditionally been the main occupation of tribal people. Hunting means killing animals for their meat, while gathering means collecting fruits and roots for different kinds of needs. Now take example of this Khond tribe living in Odisha region. Now they collect the seeds of the sal tree for the oil that it produces. Then they also collect this flower called mahua, which is used to be eaten and also to produce alcohol. Then they use another types of flowers, kusum and palash, which are used for the purpose of dye. They also rely on various forest shrubs for the medicinal value that they provide. So from this example, we get to know that they have a great understanding of the nature around them. They live in harmony with the nature at all times. Now let's look at another important activity, that is herding and rearing. Now, herding rearing means that they are living in groups, they are moving from one place to another, that is, they are living their nomadic life, but they are doing that with their cattle. Now, if we look at medieval history, we had a good example of Banjara tribe, which did the same thing. When they are living with their animals, they are able to produce a lot of animal-based products like milk, butter, and also wool. So they exchange these products with the common villagers when they visit them. Then we have shifting cultivation. Now, if we look at shifting cultivation, it is the most primitive form of cultivation. It is also known as slash and burn agriculture. Now, what happens in this is that people cut off the forested area. So these tribal people cut off the forested area so that direct sunlight can come to the ground level. And when that happens, then they burn the vegetation that is present there. So there are some small shrubs, small undergrowth of the forest which is present there, but they burn that off. And when they do it, there are ashes, and they mix these ashes with the soil, and when they do that, they are able to grow some crops. So when these ashes are mixed with the soil, the land becomes more fertile. Now they sow the seeds in it and harvest the crops. When the crop is harvested, then they again leave the land fallow for several years. And after some time, they move to another patch of land and repeat the entire cycle. Right? So they really rely on the nature to make sure that the land gets fertile again and again. This kind of agriculture we see is present everywhere around the world. In India, it is known as Jhum agriculture. Okay. Now, if we see that this kind of agriculture might have worked in the ancient times, but in the modern times, when we see that there is a lot of population, lot of needs for food crops, then it becomes a little difficult. Why? Because it is not sustainable for the environment to practice this agriculture. Now, let us move to our next topic. Changes in tribal societies during the British rule. Now, when the Britishers arrived in India, they made several changes which impacted the social and political life of Indians. But most of these changes were felt by the tribal communities. Why? Because the life of tribal people really depended on nature. They relied on forest for their livelihood, for their basic lifestyles. Now, first of all, they established plantations around the forested areas which affected the tribal people. Now, many of the tribal people were forced to work in these plantations at low wages. Earlier also we see that many tribal people used to work as farmers, but they worked on their own lands. Suddenly we see there is a drastic change where they are no longer working on their own lands, but working as peasants on the lands owned by Britishers, and they are paid a very low wage for it. Now, even in the areas where the Britishers did not dispose of the tribal people and allowed them to pursue their agriculture, they imposed heavy taxes on these areas. And because these demands of taxes were so high, the tribal people were not able to meet them, and ultimately we see that they were evicted from this land and had to pursue forced labor. Then comes land settlement. So, Britishers did not really want Jhum agriculture to continue. Jhum, as we discussed, is the name for shifting cultivation that happened in India. Now, why did they not want Jhum? It was not because this was not good for the environment or because they were interested about the interests of these tribal communities. They disliked shifting agriculture only because it was becoming difficult for them to collect revenue. You see, people who are involved in shifting cultivation move from one place to another every 2 to 3 years. And this made collecting revenue difficult for them. And this is why we see they wanted to ban shifting agriculture. Another major British policy which had a huge impact on the lives of tribal people was that of commercialization of agriculture. You see, before Britishers came to India, Indians mainly grew food crops like rice, wheat, barley and so on. But Britishers introduced commercial agriculture. In this, they wanted Indians to grow crops like jute, indigo, rubber and tea. Now these crops are grown as plantations, which means a single crop is grown over a large area so that maximum profit can be generated from this harvest. So Britishers needed a lot of money, labor and big fields to pursue commercial agriculture. And this is why they made policies which made these tribal communities work as wage laborers in their large farms. Now this affected the life of the tribal people because they were given very low wages for their hard work. We see another important trend during this time. Many of the tribal communities started to live as settled communities. It was perhaps due to the policies of British, but also the fact that agriculture was growing and these communities wanted better control. So because of all these reasons, we see that many communities started to become settled agriculturalists. Mundas of Chota Nagpur is a prime example of this, who settled in this region, and they considered themselves as the successors of those who had originally been part of these regions. So we can say they not only are settled communities, but they are culturally associating themselves with the ancestors of this region. Now let's talk about the tribal chiefs. So if we look at the position of tribal chief in any tribal community, it was that of a head. They were often considered the most important person. They were the leaders, but as the Britishers came, their position was also under threat. They were forced to follow the policies that were introduced by the British, right? So their power was also reducing, and that is why they were also angered with the British rule. Now let's talk about the British forest policies. Now the Britishers wanted the resources that were available from the forest. They wanted the wood that was coming from trees such as sal, teak, deodar, and they wanted to take these woods back to England where they could rush up the Industrial Revolution. This is why they categorized some forests as reserved forest, which were prohibited for everyone, that nobody could be allowed to enter these forests, and then they categorized some forests as protected forests. Here you could enter, but you needed a special permission to enter these forests. They did all this not to conserve these forests, but they wanted to exploit the resources by themselves. It was becoming more and more difficult for the tribal communities to get an access to these forests, and this was a huge deal for the tribal people because their lives revolved around the forest. Not just their life, even their livelihood revolved around these forests. So once they had made these forests difficult for the tribal people to be accessed, we see that many tribal people had to move from one place to another to earn a living. This was also not acceptable for the Britishers. Why? Because they wanted these tribal people to work as cheap labor in their plantations. So for this, they granted permission to the tribal people to practice jhum cultivation, but in return they forced these tribal people to work in their farms as cheap labor. So we understand that a lot of advantage had been taken of these tribal people by the British policies. Now let's talk about trade. In the modern period, we see that the trade also grew. But who was at the advantageous position because of this trade. Well, let's take example of silk production. Here, European markets had a huge demand for silk, for the Indian silk especially, because it was considered of a very good quality. So here what happened was, many traders, and most of them British, they used to come to these forests and pay some amount to the tribal people so that they could give them cocoons. Now these cocoons are used to produce silk. So they purchase these cocoons from the growers. Growers are the people who are growing the cocoons. But they paid them a very small amount, rupees 3 to 4, for 1,000 cocoons, right? So it was a very small amount. But when they used to sell this in the market, it was about 5 to 6 times of the amount that was given to the tribal people. So basically they are the middlemen. But in this case, we see that the person who is actually producing the cocoon, or rather who is rearing the silkworm for its cocoon, is not getting a lot of amount, but those who are reselling it, the middlemen, they are getting a larger share of the profit. So in this example, we can see how the tribal peoples have been exploited. Now, because of this exploitation and the fact that they were thrown out of their own land, their forests, many tribal groups resisted against the Britishers. There were many revolts against the Britishers due to this. Some of them even took to robbery. The culture of dacoits started in India, especially because of the actions taken by the British. When we look at the nature of these revolts, these are often described as unequal confrontations. Why? Because on one hand, Britishers had guns and other modern weaponry, whereas the tribals could only fight with bows and arrows. Nonetheless, we see that there were several revolts by the tribal people and they fought very bravely. If we look at the different geographical locations, whether it is the Santals or the Mundas or the Bhils, they all fought in different parts of India. In fact, before the nationwide struggle against the Britishers, we see that it was these tribal groups who were making life difficult for the Britishers with their revolts. These revolts continued till 1930s, and during this time period we also see that the nationwide struggle against the Britishers was also at its upfront, and that is why many of the non-tribal communities also joined hands with these tribal groups. Now, to further understand the struggles of the tribal people and the nature in which they revolted, let us study this case study on Munda uprising. Now, the Britishers had encroached a lot of land which belonged to the tribal people. They had taken away this land and pushed the people of the tribal communities into Beth-Begari or forced labor. The Munda rebellion is considered as a very significant step in Indian history. It is known as Ulagan or the Great Tumult. Now, this movement was aimed at removing the Britishers from their own land and establishing a Munda Raj. Now, Birsa Munda is a very interesting character. He claimed to have miraculous healing powers. He was known as Dharti Abba by his people, which meant father of the earth, and he earned this title for his selfless service to the people of his region. In 1894, we see that there was a great famine and there was starvation and diseases were spread, and he served the people of his region, for which he got this title. We see in 1897, he led a movement which was sought to establish an independent Munda state. There was a very popular slogan for this. The slogan was Abua Raj Seta Jana Maharani Raj Thunda Jana, which meant let the kingdom of the queen be ended and our kingdom be established. So they protested against the British authority, the British queen, and wanted to establish a Munda Raj. Dikus was the term that they referred to the Britishers as. So Dikus literally means foreigners. So they considered British as foreigners and they did not want them to be present in their land. But yes, even though Mundas and his followers revolted against the Britishers, it was very difficult for them. Now the Britishers came down heavily on the Mundas. If we see their confrontation, Mundas are known to have fought bravely with their bows and arrows, but it was very difficult for them to fight against the Britishers who had modern weaponry. On 3rd March 1900, we see that Birsa Munda was arrested and the guerrilla warfare in which the army fought. Basically, guerrilla warfare involves hiding out in different places when you are attacking. So they were very skilled in this guerrilla warfare, but their efforts were in vain because Britishers had modern weaponry and they were able to suppress this revolt. So even though numerous revolts had been suppressed, there was some action that was taken in the favor of the tribal communities. We see the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act of 1908, which gave some relief to the local inhabitants, to the tribal people, to safeguard their land. So we see because of these revolts, because of these rebellions from the tribal communities, there was some action that was in their favor. So with this, we end this chapter on the tribal communities. We understand that these tribal communities played a very important role in our eventual struggle against the British rule, and they set very brave examples for us on how, even though they had very less resources, they were able to show their bravery and fight against the might of Britishers. Right? So I hope you enjoyed this chapter and thank you so much for watching this. We will meet again in our next video lecture. Thank you so much.